I worked out, and the Catch Lift Foundation really helped us all. Everyone that was in my group had made great strides from it.
I feel good. And like Cal's program is a big part of that, and all that different stuff with the Coach's Corner and having coaches or having different things. Use all of it. Whatever you need, use it to get you to where you need to be. And
thank you for tuning in to the Catch a Lift Fund's Coach's Corner podcast. We hope you enjoy today's episode and will consider supporting the Catch a Lift Fund and the veterans we serve. Visit our website for more information about our programs at catchaliftfund.org. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis or suicidal thoughts, please call 988 or the Veterans Crisis Line 988, followed immediately by the number 1. The views and opinions expressed during the Coach's Corner podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the Catch a Lift Fund. The Catch a Lift Fund does not verify or warrant the truth or accuracy of statements made during the podcast, and statements therein are not to be construed as an official policy or position of the Catch a Lift Fund. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and nothing herein should be construed as health, medical, or other professional advice. The Coach's Corner is a place for veterans to connect, heal, and share their stories. I'm Melissa Luke, the host of the Coach's Corner podcast. I am a U.S. Army Iraq War veteran, coach, and program director for the Catch a Lift Fund. The Coach's Corner is sponsored by ID Technologies. Welcome to this week's episode of the Coach's Corner. Hello and welcome to the Catch a Lift Coach's Corner. I am Cal coach and program director Melissa, and this week I'm honored to welcome Heather King to today's show. Heather is a U.S. Air Force veteran, Cal veteran athlete, public affairs specialist, and so very much more. Welcome to this week's episode of the Coach's Corner. Heather, welcome.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, we're so happy to have you today and excited to talk with you. Let's jump right into it.
Yeah.
Heather, if you don't mind, would you tell us a bit about your life growing up and what would ultimately lead you to joining the U.S. Air Force?
Yeah, I mean, I was a latchkey kid. My mom, typical story. My mom was a single mom, raising 2 kids, working 2, sometimes 3 jobs, attempting to go to school so that she could put us in a better position. All the makings for a street kid. And college, just, I always wanted to go to college, but I knew it just wasn't an option. There just wasn't any resources. And then at 17, I got pregnant, and I had an application into Air Force Academy. I had all these things going. And that was really, that was my one shot.
Yeah.
And so, I ended up, having a baby at 18 and trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do with my life? Like, I can't go to college and raise a kid. I can't live at home. I can't do all these things.
Right.
And so I went to my recruiter and I said, look, plans have changed. I can't pursue Air Force Academy. Sign me up. And so we went through I had, some hoops to jump through at the time. Single parents were, the exception rather than the rule.
Right.
So I ended up having to give guardianship over to my son, but guardianship of my son to my parents, which they were happy to take him while I joined the military and went off. So that's kind of my story, my quick and dirty story.
Yeah. What do you think was it about the Air Force that drew you there as opposed to the other branches, Heather?
Well, if we're being honest, I wanted what was going to get me out the quickest.
Okay.
What was going to get me out. I grew up in a small town. It's way bigger now, but a very military town, and I just needed to go.
Yeah.
And the Air Force, I wanted my stepdad was a Black Hawk crew chief in a special ops unit, and he flew on missions, and I just was so fascinated by the aviation lifestyle.
Right.
And I told him, like, I think that's what I want to do. but also like I had a host of things. I pretty much wanted to do all of the things. And you know, he just said, look, if you're going to go aviation, and I just really think that you should go in the Air Force. Like as a
Yeah.
woman, I
Okay.
just think that that's, you know, the best place for you. Little hindsight on it, but yeah, I mean, we as a family, we just thought that, you know, the Air
Okay.
Force was going to give me you, the best
Yeah,
background for a future.
that makes sense. What MOS did you end up going into the Air Force with, Heather?
So we call it an AFSC, an Air Force Specialty Code. Because even though we try to model so many things after the Army, we still have to put the Air Force brand on it. And so I was a 2A571 as a heavy mechanic. So I started off crew chiefing B1s, and then I later moved to C-130s, which is where I finished my career at.
Incredible. Heather, what do you remember about training up as a young airman in that career?
So my experience is, when I left for basic training, you know, basic training was a fun time. It was hard, like it was really hard,
Right.
but I needed structure so much that I just felt so like this is what I want, you know.
Yeah.
And then I got to tech school, and I, you know, obviously I felt super overwhelmed when it came to aircraft mechanics and just, you know, all the information. And then 9/11 happened.
Okay.
And that was, you know, that I think my experience is so different because for some people who were already in the military, you know, their experience was different. And then everybody who came after their experience,
Right.
but I was in the middle of tech school, and I just remember walking by, like we were, friend of mine, we were on our way um, to another building, and we were walking by the TV, and we saw the first plane hit. Now, mind you, we have just like everybody else, we have no
Yeah.
idea what's happening, and you have a a dorm full of aircraft mechanics.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so the first thing that we say, I mean, everybody is like, "Oh, somebody's gonna blame the crew chief, right?" Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you can't imagine
Right.
no
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Of course. Yeah. Nobody
what was
thought.
happening.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
so it was like your instant reaction was like, "Oh, man," like,
Yeah.
pilot error, crew chief error, whatever.
Night. Yeah.
And then the second one hit, and you know, it was devastating, and like, everybody sat around that first day just sitting in the day room. People, we didn't sleep, TIs didn't bother anybody. There was a lot of people who were they couldn't find their parents,
Oh,
and
geez. Yeah. Right.
and then the
Right.
next day it was like business as usual. You know, they were like, look, you know, we have to get you guys, you have to get through this, and you have to go, and you have to go to your squadrons, and you have to do the things. And so there wasn't, you know, there wasn't a lot of time for anybody to get their heads together or anything. It was go to class,
Yeah.
study, pass, and get the fuck out.
Right. Did your mindset change at all, Heather? Right? Because it's interesting, right? Like I was, of the 9/11 warfighter generation, but right after it. So that heavily influenced, I always wanted to go into the military, but when 9/11 happened, that really solidified it, right? It was like not only did I want to join, I wanted to go to war, I wanted to be in combat. I became very, honed in for that. Did you change kind of did your approach to the military change? Like, what were you feeling now that, like once you realized what had happened, we knew this wasn't a faulty error, a couple days later, a week later, did it change your mindset?
Not for me per se. I mean, I was more concerned about my dad, who was in a
Yeah.
special ops unit, and I was more concerned about, how the effect that it was going to have on my mom, who had my son, and
Right.
he was now like really really gone, and I didn't know what was going to happen with me, and that was kind of, it was just uncertainty. But as far as like feeling any more or less
Right.
pulled, like I didn't feel that, and I think part of it was because I was shielded in kind of like the schoolhouse
Okay.
um environment. And
Right.
when I got to my section, um, I was just so consumed with trying to fit in because I knew immediately, I was the only, there was me and one other female, and she was married and very, we were two very separate people.
Okay.
And,
Right.
and I just knew I didn't fit in. So all this stuff was like happening in the background, but my 19-year-old brain was like,
Yeah.
fit in, fit in, fit in. You have to be one of the guys.
Talk to us a little bit about that, Heather. What is the culture like? Obviously in the Air Force, but more specifically, like as an aircraft mechanic doing the work that you're doing, that's obviously, extremely heavily male dominated. What was that culture like?
It's I had a lot of pride and a lot of ego at that age. And I felt every day I had to prove that I wasn't a girl.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't show a sign of weakness. My dad, I remember he had bought me this beautiful Gerber, and well, it wasn't a Gerber, it was a SOG. But he bought me this knife, and he had Airman King engraved on it, and it was just my thing. And even though it stayed in my bag because you couldn't take it on the line, you're not allowed to have personal tools, but I remember the guys like taking that from me, and they wouldn't give it back. And I am like trying, oh, it brings me
Yeah.
I was trying everything I could not to cry in front of these guys, because I couldn't do I could not show a single point of weakness. And it didn't matter, they didn't show the same patience with me trying to learn as they did the other guys. And the playful banter, it was mean. It was always
Yeah.
mean directed at me, and it was just a really hard place to cut my teeth. And there was a few people that didn't do that. There were a few people that took me under their wing, and of course, because they did, automatically, guess what I was doing?
Right. Yeah. Sleeping with them.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
And so it just, it was a difficult time. And I really loved the flight line. I loved the work. I don't I'll be the first one to tell you, I never really had an opportunity to get really good at my job like some of the other guys did, just because um, we deployed immediately after, and then it was just a chain reaction of things that happened, after that. And there was, I know the background on this, but I think the most heartbreaking thing, that there was a guy that had a lot of interest in me, and I brought it to the attention of all of other crew chiefs. I brought it to the attention of NCOs, and they just thought it was the funniest thing that this dude was like, this really awkward guy was just like, infatuated with me.
Yeah.
And they made a game of it. And the last night that we were deployed, or our last working night, I was on mid shift. We had closed the flight line early, so it's like 1, 2 in the morning when I'm coming home, and of course everybody else is nice and drunk. And they send him to my tent at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm coming out of the pagoda, and I'm in my typical Air Force PTs, the like gray sweats that don't
Yeah.
make a sound, which is a huge difference than what they have today. But like it just it was it wasn't funny, and it wasn't cute. And looking back, some of those guys have reached out, and they've been like, I am so sorry. And some of that, I guess you can chalk up to, I mean, we were in our 20s, we were kids,
Right.
we were
Yeah.
kids. And nobody could have predicted, any of the things that were going to happen. Nobody could have predicted, the aftermath and everything else that my life
Yeah.
was. Nobody could have known that. The leadership that I had was, you know, a female first sergeant. You know, she was the minority, and she had her own set of views about the roles that women play in the military,
Right.
and you know that it just things. I hate to sound like that old person, but things were so different back then. And I'm so grateful for the progress that all of the branches have made, but there is still so much work that needs to be done, you know?
Yes, there really is, and I mean, first of all, Heather, I'm so very, very from one female veteran to another, I'm so very sorry, for the things that you went through, and not only for that, but also that reaction, right? And primarily that reaction from female leadership who should have been there to immediately advocate for you and, make certain that you were safe. Yeah, I remember what it was like when I was in the military, obviously, and I got out in 2008, and right, the same thing. I'm told that it is different, and I know that it's been a struggle for the greater Department of Defense to look at military sexual trauma and how it's dealt with. And right, I pray that some of this crap is getting cleaned up, especially for how it's processed and how it's immediately handled, from those direct superiors when someone comes forward. Um, Heather, what was it like for you to come back to the US and as you transitioned out of the Air Force?
Well, quite honestly, it's only been in the past couple of years that I've really felt like I've transitioned. I immediately, started drinking, and I got into trouble. I still made rank, but I got in trouble all the time because I was so angry. And if a
Right.
dude got, anywhere near me, I was, I
Yeah.
was combative. Like, I'm going to protect myself this time. And, so I just drank for years and years, and I tried to hold my life together as if, nothing was wrong.
Right.
And it's such getting out of the military, even now, like it's better now than it was in 2007 when I left active duty. I didn't get out of the military until 2010 when I got out of the
Okay.
reserves. In 2007, when I separated from active duty, number one, like, I didn't even know that I could call myself a veteran, right? I was under the impression the only people who got to wear that title of veteran were people who retired after 20
Yeah.
years. And that wasn't me. So it was just like, oh, I've
Right.
had a job for the
Yep.
past 6 years. And nobody cared. Nobody cared that I was in the military. I remember sitting in an interview, sitting in an interview with the Secretary of State's office. I was for an entry level job as a copy editor. And in the interview panel, I'm like crying my eyes out because they're grilling me. Why don't you have a degree? All of your peers your age have a degree. Why don't you have anything? And I'm like, I've been deploying for the past
Right.
6 years. Like, when could I go to school? Like, we were in remote locations, and their technology wasn't the way it is now. Like,
Right. Yeah, much different.
we had a phone tent and a phone card.
For
You
real.
remember?
Yes. Yes, I do remember, they were the biggest commodity you had was those phone cards.
Yes, yes. So there wasn't any, there wasn't any opportunity, and it was
Yeah.
really hard for me to find a job. And then on top of that, it was like May 15th, 2007, I was a part of the club, and May 16th, I woke up and nobody cared about
Yeah.
me anymore. Like, I wasn't part of the club. And that just really took a toll on me. And I pretty early was like, okay, I'm in the reserves. And the moment I had the opportunity to be an active duty reservist, I took it because I just didn't know how to live my life without the military. And I didn't want
Yeah.
to be in the military anymore, but I didn't know how to do anything
Yeah,
different.
I get that. Right.
And so it's just been, this I've said, for the past couple of years, like I haven't held a job for more than, 2 years, 2 or 3 years, not because I've quit, just I'm constantly transitioning from one thing to the next. And then it wasn't until like, getting sober really changed my life and changed my ability to feel comfortable and to not always feel like I have to prove something and I have to
Right.
chase something and I have to be better. And it's opened all kinds of doors for me. And I'm finally like in a place where I have a job where I feel like I hope I want to stay there
Yeah.
until it's time for me not to stay there. And that's kind of another weird thing is like I think that our age group, like we're the last group of people, we're caught between two societies, right?
Yeah.
Generations older than us sought jobs to retire from with a 401k and a
Yes.
pension
Yep.
and all those things. And like if you found a job, that's where you were at for 20
Yep.
plus years.
Exactly. For sure.
And then the generation right underneath us is like, oh, wait a minute. You mean I have to give my life to this company that
Right.
doesn't care about me? No
Mm-hmm.
thanks. And
Yeah.
so there's this duality that's like existing in all of us. And it's been really hard to identify that that's even something that was affecting my transition is my thought process,
Right.
and then move through it.
So we're gonna continue as the episode goes on, to talk about that greater transition and what these last few years have looked like for you. But one of the things that really struck me, right, was when you're talking about early on being in that job interview, right, and you're just being barraged with, "Why don't you have a degree? Why don't you have a degree?" But you would go on to get 2 degrees. What would drive you, Heather, to go on and go for your master's?
Like I said, pride and ego.
Yeah,
It wasn't enough.
they're a driver.
Yeah, it wasn't enough to have a bachelor's degree. And quite honestly, I got my bachelor's degree in political science and a minor in military history because I really wanted to be involved in politics and I wanted to be a speechwriter. But I also wanted to go back in the Air Force as an officer.
Yeah.
Um, and so like I got my bachelor's and I went to my recruiter's office and I was like, hey, take me back. And they were like, yeah, so about that, we'll take you back if you come enlisted as a crew chief again. And I was like,
Oh,
I
jeez.
don't want to do that. I just
Yeah.
used all my GI Bill to go to school to get a degree that you guys say I have, to show that I am worthy of being an officer. Like, and they were like, yeah, no thanks, we're not taking prior service. And
Oh,
and I was
jeez.
like, okay, so you don't want me back, that's fine. And I was like, I'll just keep plugging along. And so I applied it to George Washington University, and I consider myself really lucky. George Washington University allowed me to basically build my own master's program at the time. So I have a lot of my degree title is strategic public relations, but what I
Okay.
have heavy concentration in is crisis management and speech writing. I'm a storyteller and I love telling stories, and they gave me the opportunity to really hone those skills. And they were one of the early universities that were pioneers of the Yellow Ribbon program. They were very, very friendly to veterans. And it was a blessing to be able to go there and to get a
Wow.
master's from there.
That's tremendous. Congratulations, Heather. That's absolutely tremendous. One of the other incredible things about you is you're a Tillman Scholar. Would you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, if it hadn't been for the Tillman Foundation, I would not have a master's degree. I had reached the end of my Montgomery GI Bill. Okay, Montgomery GI Bill.
Yep.
So many people. This post 9/11 GI Bill blows the Montgomery GI Bill out of the water.
Yeah, it really, really does. Yep.
But I had exhausted that and I didn't have any more money. And George Washington is not a cheap
Right.
school. and I was about to drop out. I at the time was married and living in Germany, and I came across this scholarship opportunity, and I read it, and I was like, there is no way, like there's no way they're absolutely not going to pick me, but I'm going to apply anyways. And so I wrote an essay, and I just talked about, my life trying to help other veterans transition, even though I didn't know what transitioning really should look like because I was
Right.
still trying to do it, but I was trying to help other people navigate the same space. And as an army spouse at the time, I took we were older. My ex-husband joined the military at 27, 28. So we were older. And so we took in a lot of these young soldiers and their families and really just tried to work to mentor them.
Right.
And so I had an interview in Germany, and we were in the middle of PCSing to Okinawa, and they called me, and I was on a bus full of Marines, just me and all these Marines, rowdy young Marines, and they're asking Tillman. It was Kara Campbell, and she wouldn't mind me saying her name, but she's asking me these very deep personal questions.
Right.
What made you want to join the military, and who were your heroes, and all of this stuff. And I'm like, telling her
Oh
my
my gosh. Yeah.
story. And there's all these Marines dropping these obscene comments,
I
just,
can only imagine.
yeah.
Yeah. Oof.
And I hung up the phone, and I remember just crying my eyes out thinking I blew it. Like I got home, and I was told my husband, like, I'm dropping out of school. This was my last shot. And a couple of weeks later, my Skype rings in the middle of the night, and I answer it, and then I throw the computer back down, and then I was like, "Oh my god." And I call back, and, like, the whole board, they're like, "Hey, we just wanna welcome you." And I was like,
Oh,
"Oh my
wow.
god,"
Oh
'cause,
my gosh.
the time difference.
Yeah.
And so I was just I was so overwhelmed. I could not believe that this incredible foundation, which at the time was so much younger than it is
Yeah.
now,
Right.
I couldn't imagine that they saw something in me. And one of the things that they explained to me, and I tell this to anybody that I mentor that's going through the process. I tell this to people that I try to get to apply. What makes the Tillman Foundation so very different than any other organization is that it's not a scholarship. It really is not a scholarship. Yes, there's a financial component that comes to everybody who gets selected, but it's a community. And without this community, I promise you I would not be sitting here today, because it's because of somebody in the Tillman Foundation that
Mhm.
I got sober. And it's because of somebody in the Tillman Foundation that, I didn't kill myself when I, was at my worst. And I owe my life to the people in the foundation, and they're all so incredible, passionate people who just want to make change in their communities, in the world, in their homes. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
the caliber of people that I've met, and the people who sit on the board and sit on the selection committee. I mean, these are really heart centered people, and and they're making an investment in people. They don't care. They're willing to do whatever it takes to eliminate any financial barriers or any barriers a person has to making change. Like,
Oh, that's tremendous.
in
Wow.
so many other organizations, like, I've gotten scholarships, been given a check, and then it's see you
Yeah.
later,
Right.
nobody else
Yep.
cares. But it's not that way with the Tillman Foundation, and I'm just so incredibly lucky and honored to be a part of it. And I really, I encourage everybody, check them out, donate, apply, participate, do the runs. The runs are so fun. It's really just the best people I know.
That's tremendous. Thank you for sharing that with us. I know, like, I'm quite a lot more familiar with it now, after we first talked to you, because I went and looked it up, and I'm like, this is absolutely tremendous, and, an incredibly prestigious thing to be awarded. So, kudos for you for going after that. That's just absolutely tremendous, Heather. So you've continued to serve the military in your career now as a public affairs officer. Talk to us a little bit about what exactly led you into this current position, and talk to us a little bit about what your job entails.
So I really I cut my teeth in public affairs at the VA. And if you
Ooh, that oh my gosh.
Yep,
If you can do public affairs for the VA, I'm guessing you can do it pretty much anywhere.
pretty much anywhere. That's I absolutely I couldn't have had a better way to start my career in public affairs. I learned just so much about communication, and communicating in a government agency.
Yeah.
And how I ended up with the Corps of Engineers. You know, I always say I was raised in the Air Force, but the Army is the only one that wants me. Um, because I've always after I left the VA, I've almost exclusively worked for the Army.
That's incredible.
I worked in recruiting for a while, doing public affairs for USAREC, and that was a good. I mean, that was a really good time. And I needed something. I needed something long term, and I had always taken positions that were either temporary, not to exceed a year, or not to exceed 2 years, because I have commitment issues clearly, and so I had an opportunity. My boss at USAREC actually like recommended that I apply for this job and at the Corps of Engineers. And once again, it was like, I don't know if I'm good enough. And he was like, "You're really good. You should definitely do this." And I did, and it has been. I've had so much fun doing this. I grew up here in Tennessee and in Kentucky, and I through the Corps of Engineers, I'm finally like getting to see where I live. It's such an amazing experience. There are so many. Water plays such a huge role in our lives, and we take it for
Yeah.
granted. And our mission and in the Nashville district is really we have a huge navigation piece, and so it's been really awesome to tell these stories about things that people that are happening all around us, but in the background that people don't think about. And I'm it's a fun time to go to work every day. When I first talked to you, you know, I was dealing with a barge that
Oh
had
my
sunk
gosh, yeah.
in one of our locks, and so I spent the rest of that week I spent out in Kentucky in the start of a heat wave, filming and interviewing and working with local media outlets, to tell this story that it was not a positive thing that happened,
Yeah,
but to
right.
be able to talk about it in a positive way and make sure that the public is incredibly informed, that makes a huge difference in how people view your organization. Is what are you willing to take responsibility
Right.
for, and what are you willing to communicate? And that level of transparency is something that I bring not just to my professional life, but I bring it to my personal life.
Right.
As there's nothing that is more effective than open and honest communication.
So I would imagine, just it was funny because that was one of the most unique Coach's Corner prep calls we've ever done was with you. And like, I absolutely loved it. And like, you come on and you're like, we've got a or we've got a barge at the bottom of a lake or something. You're like, give me a few minutes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this woman. I'm like, I like her already. And you come back on just like a boss lady. So I mean, I can only imagine, because like you're describing, right? Like these events take place, and you need to figure out, how to be able to inform the public of what's going on, and be open, honest, transparent for it. But I would certainly imagine that is quite challenging to do, both like, you're dealing with political factors and different things that play a part in it. How do you kind of how do you take something that is inherently not a good event that's happened, but be able to present it to the public in a way that, it can be stomached or kind of digested, I guess?
I mean, that's my first go-to is, well, what can I say? What can I say, and what do people want to know? People want to know, just like in any sit rep, right? 5 W's.
Right. Okay.
That's what every person wants to know is what are the 5 W's? And so I start off, that's my first part of my outline when I walk through the communication process is what are the 5 W's? What about the 5 W's can I communicate? And what is the public perception? And I go through all of the things, people who are incredibly favorable of our mission, what are they going
Okay.
to say? People who are not favorable of our mission, what are they going to say?
Right.
What's the neutral piece? And I just try to be as transparent as possible and acknowledge that. And that's the biggest thing is when you acknowledge how people view something, that goes a long way.
Right.
They may not necessarily change how they view it, but what will change is how they view you. They can disagree with the things that you do, but if they know that you're going to be open and honest with them, they're
Right.
way more willing to stomach that and to lay off the criticism. And then obviously, I leverage social media a lot. So many people have this habit, social media. There's this quote that social media, a lot of people approach social media that it's a one-way conversation, and it's not. It's a dialogue every single time. And when a lot of communicators get it wrong, is they'll post and ghost.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and you can't, you're not building a community, you're not building trust with your audience, you're not informing people when you just post and ghost. You have to stay and um you have to redirect them to your resources and just really sit through those hard conversations. And it's such an intuitive, simple thing, but so many people get it so wrong
Yeah.
because of pride and ego. They don't want to get the backlash from saying the wrong thing or
Definitely.
saying the right thing, but for the wrong people.
Right.
So it's a very delicate dance, and you learn as you go, and there's always going to be missteps. But even in the missteps, as long as you take responsibility for that and you take accountability for what you could have done better and what you will do better in the future, I think you can pretty much come out of almost anything pretty unscathed.
Thank you for talking us through that. It's absolutely, absolutely fascinating to me. Um, I want to kind of step our conversation here a little bit, kind of back onto our greater talk, right, of your transition and kind of your journey post Air Force. So throughout your transition back into civilian life, Heather, you've had to cope with trauma. How have you dealt with the trauma? What things have you found most effective to you?
Um, First and foremost, a, a 12-step program. I really owe my life to the 12 steps. And that's not everybody's journey, and
Right.
that's fine. I don't care how people get sober,
Right.
but that's what worked for me at that time. Um, I just couldn't see things clearly, and I didn't have a shot of seeing anything clearly until I got sober.
Right.
So that was the first thing I did, and I utilized the vet center, which for me also, I didn't have a lot of success with VA like standardized mental health,
Right.
but the vet center program that they had, I it was incredible for me. I had an incredible guy he was a combat veteran. He was retired, and he just sat with me in all of the things, and he really held my hand, in baby steps. And he was the first man that I trusted. Um, and he just had a way of breaking down these barriers and these walls that I had. And then, like a lot of people who were doing really good work during, that 2015-16 timeframe, he ultimately left the VA,
Yeah.
and I felt really abandoned
I'm sure. Yeah.
because I was like, I can't do this with anybody else.
Yeah. I get that. Yep.
And so, but I kept plugging along, and he had extended an opportunity to me to still talk to him. and because he went to the vet center, or he went to the Cohen Clinic, and so I saw him there, and continued my care, but then also had transitioned to using the VA, and typical protocol, right?
Yeah.
Here's your
Yep.
meds.
Yep. Here's your brown bag.
Yep. And there wasn't a lot of
Yeah.
care. So a lot of that, the work that I did in therapy, and I did in sobriety, and slowly and surely, with a good support system, I started putting my life together. I started, exercising, even though I didn't believe that it was really going to help me like everybody said.
Right. Yep.
But it was something that, allowed me some control over my body. And then about, 2.5 years in to being sober and taking my meds as prescribed. I was never the person that overtook my meds. I would just stop taking them. Like,
Okay.
oh, I
Yeah.
feel good today. I
Yeah.
don't need these antidepressants. And then a week later, I'm curled up in a ball trying to
Jeez,
figure out what
yeah.
happened. So part of my amends process to my doctor was I will take my meds as prescribed. And so I
Okay.
did that. And so I gave it, 2.5 years of hardcore, like, regimented.
Yep. Right.
And I remember saying to my therapist, like, look, I've never been at this point in my life. Like, I feel healthy. I'm taking care of my body. I am going to therapy. I'm taking my meds. I have a good diet. I'd really like to see what I could do without medication. And she was like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Like, no. And then I tried to compromise, like, okay, what if we just keep me on the sleep meds and eliminate everything else? Because if I can just regulate my sleep,
Yeah.
maybe the depression, the anxiety, the trigger symptoms, maybe that stuff will even itself out if I'm sleeping. And again, no, no, no. And then the final straw for me was I would get these incredible brain zaps, right? And I don't know any other way to explain it. It would feel like if you take your hand in a fist and you squeeze it as tight as you can, and then you take your other hand and put it over it, right? This is what my brain constantly felt like. And then these zaps would happen, and it was like somebody was taking an electrical prod and shooting electrical currents into this hand, right? And then
Right.
it would just squeeze. And I would lose, like, I would glitch. I could be in the middle of a sentence and I would stop like this
Oh, jeez.
and just glitch. And it was so uncomfortable, and it was happening when I was driving. So I got to a point where I was like afraid to drive my car to work, which was like an hour away, because it was happening so frequently, and I would lose like all spatial
Mm.
time. And when I went to her and I told her that, like, her answer was either she would up my dose or
Yeah.
she would put me on a new medication. And she's like,
Right.
"Oh, you probably reached its shelf life." I shouldn't reach the shelf life after 2 weeks, you
Jeez.
know? And, um,
Oh,
and so I did something incredibly reckless, and I will not I tell this story, but my disclaimer is you should not do this. But I was desperate.
yeah.
And in uh, December 30th of 2020, I called the people that were closest to me and I said, "Look, I'm going off my meds and I'm going cold turkey." And one of those girls that I called is a therapist, and she was like, "I strongly advise you not to do this,
Yeah.
Heather." And I said, "Thank you. I appreciate your concern,
Right.
but I don't have any other options at this
Yeah.
point." And I very upfront, I asked the people, my circle is 5 people, and I said,
Okay.
if I start to act erratically out of character, I've never been in this space before, but if you will probably notice before I'm ever willing to admit that I need to go back on meds. And so I did that, and it was, oh my god, the withdrawal was so much harder than quitting drinking. It was just so very painful. And um and a friend of mine asked me if I wanted to come visit her. She said that she had some ideas of something that may help me, And I was very reluctant. She had talked to me about entheogens, which is psilocybin mushrooms, and I was like, I can't do that. Like, I'm sober, and we had a lot of conversations, and it took a lot of research on my part to get to the point where I could be open-minded enough to say, okay, maybe. And so
Right.
I flew out to see her, and my first experience was nothing. I had a lot, and it didn't do anything. And what we later deduced was that I still had the SSRIs,
They
SNRIs,
were
and MAOIs in my body.
in your system.
Right.
Right.
And so all of those blocked the psilocybin.
Yep.
And so it was at that point that I was introduced to NDMT, which, lucky for me, I didn't know anything about it. Did not know the relationship to ayahuasca or bufu. Like, I did not know anything about NDMT. And I consider myself very lucky for that, because I probably would have not done it if I had known
Right.
anything
Scared
about
you
it.
out on the front end. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember it was a very powerful experience. It was beautiful and terrifying all at the same time. Um, but I remember feeling something that I had never felt my entire life. And I felt love for the first time, and I felt like maybe I'm not broken.
Right. Right.
I had spent the past 10 years just thinking I was this broken person
Yeah.
walking around aimlessly, and that I didn't know how to love anyone or anything. And DMT, I mean, it lifted the veil just enough to get me curious.
Yeah.
And then I had a couple other much smaller, less impactful experiences, but each time, as the regular medicine, as the pharmaceuticals, I should say, as the pharmaceuticals began to leave my body and plant medicine started to come into my life,
Yep.
I noticed, a lot of differences. And then I was invited to attend this retreat for women, and it was mixed. It was 4 Navy SEAL wives and then 4 female veterans, and it was a, a ceremony like nothing I had ever experienced. It was an experience that really and truly just it changed my life. And mind you, like, I'm still working a 12-step program.
Yeah.
But what plant medicine did for me is it allowed me to touch things that I couldn't even, no matter how much work I did in therapy, no matter how much work I did in a 12-step program, there were things that
You couldn't
I
access.
just couldn't access, and I
Yeah.
wanted to. And that just, like, you know, that just furthered the guilt and the shame, like, that
Right. Yeah.
I couldn't fix myself, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the most incredible piece of the ceremony was the aftermath, right? So many people use plant medicine, and they don't have any form of integration afterwards.
Right. Right.
And the integration for me was the most powerful part. Like, the medicine, quite honestly, that's the easy part. It's the integration,
It's
and
the integration.
how do I rewire my brain, and how do I take advantage of this neuroplasticity that's existing,
Right.
create these new pathways, these new thought processes, these new habits and patterns. And that's how yoga ended up really being such a powerful force in my life. And I get really emotional when I talk about yoga, because it was something I've always wanted to do, but I just never could get into it. And after this experience, I really got really curious about it, and it has been life changing also, because it's allowed me to connect with my body. Like, I've
Right.
always been living up here in my head, and not anywhere in my heart space or in myself, whatever the self is. And yoga has allowed me to drop into that. It's allowed me to feel the ground beneath me. Um, and that's just been a phenomenal experience. I think that plant medicine for me um, has just been such a wonderful experience, and I have a lot of thoughts on how it gets talked about and how it gets used and
Right.
all that kind of stuff. But the important thing is, I really think that especially with veterans, there's so much stuff that's so deep rooted that if a person feels like they're just not making progress anymore. I don't think that plant medicine should ever be anybody's first go-to. That's There's some work. I think you can be much better prepared if you've already done some work. Um,
Right.
than just diving right into it. Some people dive into it and they don't have, you know, they don't know how to interpret or to deal with the things that happen.
Right,
They
exactly. That
also
integration, that
Yeah,
integration piece
and they don't
again.
have that integration
Yep.
piece. So immediately after the integration process, like I was like, this is it. This is the missing
Yeah.
piece in this conversation. So what did I do? I went back to school.
Oh my
I
gosh.
went back to school to get certified as an integration coach. Specifically in addiction and recovery, and working with people um, who are struggling with drug addiction and alcoholism, because I mean, this is a new idea, using psychedelics for recovery and addiction. Bill Wilson was a notable supporter, but it's definitely something that I think that for long term addicts, people who have really deep addictions
Yeah.
to things like, especially to like meth and heroin,
Right.
psychedelics can work when other things haven't. And so I'm really diving into that work on the side.
That is just fascinating. Heather, thank you so much for openly talking to us about that. Very much appreciated. Um, so, like you talked about, yoga came almost seemingly kind of like a flow from the plant medicine.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit more about yoga in your life now, Heather, and just, how that has aided your integration and kind of your day to day life moving forward on this journey.
Yeah, so, there was a time in my life where I was a big meathead, right? When I first got sober, I was taking all the supplements, I was taking a few other things, and, I was just like, getting small and beefy, and I was like, I want to do a competition. But I couldn't figure out, other people go to the gym and they go to the gym angry and they walk out and they're like peaceful and serene.
Yeah.
Like, that's not my
Yeah.
story. If I was angry
That's
when
not
I
my
walked
story.
in, I had a crappy workout because I'm just like throwing stuff around.
Yeah.
And then I'm feeling crappy when I get home because I know either A, I'm going to be extra sore because I was super irresponsible in my movements, or, it just didn't work for me. I
Yeah.
mean, granted, I loved how my body looked, but
Right.
the way I felt was not, the needle was not moving forward. And
Yeah, mentally, emotionally, it
yeah,
wasn't hitting those marks.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yoga, oh gosh, it's something that I look forward to every day. It's not easy. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
Um, just using your own body for balance, and especially for somebody like me who's been so disconnected from their body.
Right.
You know, my trauma response is freeze, and you freeze for so long, like you don't even know that you have a body
Yeah.
anymore. Like
Yep.
it's just there.
Yeah, you're just closed and frozen.
Yeah, and so yoga has really put me in touch with that, and it really is something that if I start and I'm not in the best of frame of minds, by the time I'm done, I just have so much gratitude for myself and for my body and all of the things that I've put it through.
Yeah.
because I can feel it. I can feel the earth, and I can feel like this is a part of me. And I think yoga is really, I think it's underutilized. It's under, it's another one of those things that it gets marketed, right? People see that,
Yeah, oh, for sure.
you know,
Yep.
that the mom on Instagram with her Starbucks. I'm going to my yoga class now, guys. I'm going.
Oh, that's totally it.
Yeah, and that was the whole reason that I didn't want to do yoga,
Yeah,
is because I didn't
right.
wanna be associated with that, but I do it in my house. Sometimes I make time-lapse videos, and I set them to, like, heavy metal.
Oh,
Um
no kidding.
yeah, yeah, it's
That's
on my
cool.
Instagram. And I do that just because, like, I'm not I'm not perfect. I don't have these really beautiful, clean lines that you see for people who've been practicing for,
Yeah.
20 and 30 years. And I want to show, like, it's accessible. It's
Yeah,
accessible to everybody, and it doesn't matter what kind of music you're into. It doesn't matter, what kind of lifestyle you lead. Like, getting into your body is probably the best thing that you can do for your mental health, for your physical health, and really and truly, I've been medication free for 2 years,
oh, heck
and
yeah, good for you,
and
Heather.
I am doing things that I could not do when I was taking meds.
Yeah,
And I really like how I feel right now in my life today is exactly what I thought antidepressants and anxiety meds and all the PTSD meds, like, that's what I
yeah,
thought they were gonna make
they
me
were supposed to
feel,
do.
right?
Yeah, they were supposed to do that.
And they didn't do any of that. If At best, they made me numb. And today I feel joy, and I feel sadness. When sadness comes up, I feel it, and it's okay to feel sad.
Yeah,
I move it through my body when I feel it. I
right.
do yoga when I feel it. And it's not only is it strengthening my mental health, but it's strengthening my body. Like,
For sure.
I can do a plank, and not, complain about it.
Yeah,
I'm learning, that my body, your body, all of our bodies, like, God, they're so incredible, and
yeah,
we
they are.
take them for granted, and
Yeah,
they move us through this world. They protect us. They deserve so much praise and honor. And when I'm doing yoga, that's what I get to do, is I get to praise and honor my body. I know that sounds like super hippie frou frou stuff, but
I like it. I like it.
I really, I think that, even for people who are like the most gung ho, like, brovets,
Yeah,
if brovets started doing yoga, they're I really think that their minds would change about a lot of things. Because you can't be so contrarian when you're
yeah,
so connected to your body,
right.
and to other things.
Absolutely tremendous. Thank you for sharing all that with us, Heather. I'm so very grateful that you found the plant medicine to help you and that, yoga, that you were able to find that as an extension and a way to integrate and really, work it for your healing. Um, Talk to us a little bit, Heather. How did you learn about Catch a Lift?
So oddly enough, I was out at in Wilson Lock in Alabama, which is I have all the territory on the Tennessee River, and we were filming a dewatering, and I had drone support, and so one of the drone operators, we were talking about fitness because he's like, "Oh, you look like you work out," and
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, yeah.
And so then, he was talking about, he's like, "Well, I use Catch a Lift, and, like, here's
Oh,
all the,"
nice.
yeah, he's like, "Here's all the things that, they helped me with, and, it was especially great. I don't have to pay for, like, an expensive gym membership, and, I really get to take care of me." And he was
Yeah,
like, "You should definitely check it out." And I was like, I'm working, my own
yeah.
kind of health, and I took it. I took it as a program that, like, had I been in crisis mode, then I would have been a good candidate. Like,
Yeah,
that's
right.
my immediate thing. But then the more that I read, and then I kind of talked to him again about it at work, and he's like, you don't have to be in crisis mode, man.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, but you have a story that, like, I guarantee you they'd be willing to support, your journey in your
Yeah.
in your body. And I was like, all right. And so here I am. So I
Oh, I
applied,
love
uh,
it.
and here I am. And my first couple of meetings were with Adam, uh, and he's such an incredible person. He's so
Oh my
funny.
gosh, yes,
Um,
he's awesome.
he was a really good guy, and then Sean ended up being my coach, and I think that that's because of the yoga connection, that she ended up being my coach, which is another one of those like universe happy
For
happenings.
sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
because she's like one of the only people that has, a dedicated yoga
Yeah.
practice. We have similar stories in a lot of things and what yoga has done for us. And so it's been really great to work with her. It's been great to feel supported and not, I had usually been reluctant to talk to people about yoga because
Yeah.
it's such a, it's such a hippie thing for some people, or it's so trendy for others, that
Right. Yeah.
I just am like hold it close to me. So it's been really nice to have somebody, that I can talk to about it, and I can talk to about, the times that I've just randomly cried um in Warrior 2, like what is that about? And she's like, "Oh yeah, that's you're just processing emotions, man." And
Coach Sean, I love it.
and so
Oh.
I really enjoy, I look forward to my time with her each
Oh,
week.
that's wonderful.
And I've just found the whole program to be really accessible. I like the accountability, not just in Cal, but in Strengthlead, and being able to have, have these programs, and your body weight to bands program is super awesome. I mean, I can't. When I started it, I couldn't do the handstands for as long as, I think the first one is like a minute, and then it's like 3 minutes. And because I couldn't do 1 minute all at once, I was like, eh. But it's definitely a progression program,
Yeah,
and
for
that's
sure.
what I like.
Yep.
Because you really can start anywhere,
Yeah.
build
Yep,
yourself
start where you are.
yeah.
Yep.
And
Wonderful.
I've really found, like, being able to have notes that I can, like, write, like, this is what worked well this week, and this is what didn't work well. And then it's not like, did you complete your program? Yes or no. It's
Yeah, exactly,
what
right.
obstacles did you have, and what can you go into, your next week? How can you make minor adjustments? And that's what I really like, because I've found, in my life, especially, with getting sober, like, it's the little incremental change. And these are all things you hear growing up, right? But until you've embodied them and done them, it doesn't make sense.
Absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
but it's these little incremental changes. So what, you can't do a minute handstand, can you do 10 seconds? So
Yeah.
do 10 seconds now, do 10 seconds again, and so on and so forth. And I really appreciate the program, and I appreciate just the open arms that I've been met with. I it's an incredible community, and I'm really happy to be here.
We're so very happy that you are here with us, Heather, and we're so happy that you're having that experience and feeling that. I'm so very glad that you're able to work with Coach Sean and that she is a yoga veteran. That's
Yes.
absolutely wonderful. And I hope by, you sharing your story and such, and just, talking about yoga and what it has done for you and your body and your mind, that more veterans, will look to that. It's absolutely tremendous. Heather, I have one last question for you today. What does it mean to you to be a Catch a Lift Fund veteran athlete?
um I one word, community.
Yeah,
um I we're all better together. We're not meant, no matter how much it's drilled into us that we can do everything alone, and
right.
we're not meant to be that. We're not meant to be alone. We're not meant to struggle alone, and we're not meant to heal alone. If it wasn't for communities, like I said, I wouldn't be here today.
Yeah.
And I just encourage anybody who's listening to this, plug into a community. Let people help you, and let people love you, even if you don't think you're worthy of love, even if you
Yeah.
don't know how to love. Other people do, and they're willing to extend that. And some people show it through moving their bodies. And people have different ways, but let it happen, and be a part of a community.
Heather, thank you so very much for your service to our great country. And thank you so very much for your willingness to come on the show today and share so openly and honest with us. And it's just absolutely beautiful, your words.
Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode of the Coach's Corner. We will return next Wednesday at 1 Eastern Time with another episode. Thank you again, Heather, for sharing your story and your beautiful light with us all today. Thank you to ID Technologies for your support of this Catch a Lift Fun Coach's Corner podcast. Huge thank you to Lynn Coughlin, Henry Pomper, and Kaylee Nasiri for all of the work in making this podcast possible week after week. And we thank the entire Catch a Lift team. Don't forget to join us every Wednesday live at 1 p.m. Eastern on YouTube for a chance to win Cal swag and to chat with your brothers and sisters. Until next week, keep it real and stay Cal strong.